Good morning. So as promised, we are going to continue with our using equations to model word problems, right? We said this should take 3, maybe 4 days. So we're going to continue from where we left off with the previous lesson. We're going to continue to do that every day until we're done with this kind of mini unit here. So for the do now, again, guys, this is what you should be doing, okay? So if you're just watching me do it and waiting, you're not really learning anything. You're not practicing what we did with the previous lesson. So for number 1, I don't have a lot of space here, but I'm going to say that X represents the number of microphones, right? It says he bought a guitar for $600 and some microphones, and then we get the question, right? We get our variable statement in the question, how many microphones? So I'm going to say X microphones. Now, again, I'm doing a little shorthand here, right? If I was doing this the right way, I would say let X represent the number of microphones that Ozzy bought. So we know that he bought a $600 guitar plus X microphones that were $40 each. So my equation should be 600 plus 40X equals 1,040. I'm going to add negative 600 on both sides. It gives me 40X equals 440. And when I divide by 40, I get X is 11. So our answer as a sentence would be he bought 11 microphones, okay? I'm not requiring you to check, but if you wanted to check, you would go back through the problem. 11 times 40 is 440 plus 600 is 1,040. Again, we're not going to check the equation because we made it. Number 2, Bruce tripled his guitar collection and then bought X 7 more. So we're going to say, how many did he start with? So we're going to say X is the number of guitars he started with, right? That's our let statement. So what happens at the beginning? Okay, let's start from the basics. He's got X guitars. Now what happens? He triples his collection. Okay, now I've got 3 X guitars. I have 3 times what I started with when I started with X. Now I bought 7 more, and now I have 52. So 3X plus 7 equals 52, which gives me 3X equals 45, which gives me X is 15. All right, and then look at number 3. It says Ronnie had some CDs, he bought more, he doubled, now he's got 120. How many to start with? So I'm going to say let X represent the amount he started with. So he started with X, and what's the first thing that happens? He bought 11 more. So as of right now, he started with X CDs, he's got 11 more, he's got an X plus 11 CDs. Now he doubled his collection. Well, I can't double something without putting it in parentheses and multiplying it by 2. So I had X CDs, I got 11 more, now I doubled that. So it's 2 times the quantity X plus 11, which turns out to be 2X plus 22 equals 120, which is 2X equals 98. So when I divide by 2, I get X equals 49. And if we want to do a quick check, if we start with 49 CDs and buy 11 more, we've got 60. When we double that, we get 120. So today's lesson, for the most part, won't be too different. We're going to incorporate some things with fractions, all right, and some things with percents. That's what's going to be kind of different today. So the first one says, Jimmy bought 11 guitar picks, then lost half his collection, leaving him with 24. Write and solve an equation to find out how many he started with. So let X represent the number of picks he started with. All right, so now he started with X picks. He bought 11 more. Now he's got X plus 11. Now he lost half of them. So the way you really want to think about it is if he lost half of them, then he kept the other half. So he still has half. So he's got half of his X plus 11. Could I do X plus 11 minus 1/2 parentheses X plus 11? I guess you could do that, but that's really not going to be a very efficient way of doing this, right? He had X picks. Now he's got X plus 11. Now he loses half, meaning he's going to keep the other half. So he's got half of his X plus 11, which another way to say half is divide by 2, leaving him with 24. Okay? So we want to eliminate that denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. That'll give me X plus 11 equals 24 times 2, which is 48. So X is 37. So my answer in a sentence would be Jimmy started with 37 guitar picks, right? Because if he started with 37, and then he bought 11 more. Now he's up to 48, and he lost half of them. So half of 48 is 24. So we can see that it will check. And guys, as always, if I'm going too fast, that's the good thing about having videos and having Edpuzzle is that you can pause it, you can go back, you can take the notes that you should be taking. Okay. Okay, whereas in class, if I'm going too fast and we miss something, it's a little bit harder to go back to it, especially if you let me know about it at the end of the period. But if you get to the end of the video and you're stuck, the homework is always modeled on the problems that I do. A lot of times I copy and paste them and I change some things around and I change the numbers around, maybe the situation, but the math behind it is the same. This one's a little bit harder. So Mick spent a quarter of his savings on concert tickets. Now he's got $450 left. How much did he start with? So X represents, right, how much money Mick started with. All right, guys, and I'm using some abbreviations here to do this a little quicker, to not make this video, half an hour long. So let X represent how much money Mick started with. So he started with X. He spent a quarter of X. Now he's got $450 left. Okay, let's combine those like terms. X being 1X minus 1/4 X is 3/4 X. So if 3/4 X is equal to 450, and I multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is 4/3, I end up with 600. So my answer in a sentence would be Mick started with $600. And if we check it, you start with $600, right? A quarter of 600 is 150. So if I subtract 150, it gives me 450. Now, really, guys, we should be starting with this equation. Okay, in other words, when I do problems like this, and I tried to model that with the one with Jimmy's guitar picks, I think about what I have left. In other words, if I've got some money, right, and I spent 1/4 of my money, what do I have left? I have 1 minus 1/4. I have 3/4 of it. So that's really the way we want to think about this. Okay, could I use this equation? Absolutely. And for a lot of us, or for some of us, I guess, maybe that's going to be easier, and I'll model them like that. But when you're working on your own, you really can cut to that second equation, right? Think about how much you have left. All right, very similar situation here, right? Patty spent 2/5 of her savings on a bike. She spent $30 on a lock. Now she has $450 left. Write an equation to find how much Patty started with. So I'm going to say let P represent the amount Patty started with. All right, so she started with X. She spent 2/5 of X. Guys, that's where I end up seeing mistakes. And if we can go to the last one too, right? I'm going to see people that are going to put X minus 1/4 instead of 1/4 of X. That is not going to work, right? You didn't lose 1/4 of a dollar. That's a quarter. You didn't lose 2/5 of a dollar. You didn't lose 40 cents. You lost 2/5 of what you started with. 2/5 of her savings, right? Not 2/5 of a dollar. So how much did she start with? X. What did she do? She spent 2/5 of X. So we're losing 2/5 of X. And then what did she do? She spent another $30 on a bike. So she had X. She spent 2/5 of her X. And then on top of that, she spent another $30. Now she's only got $450 left. So let's combine the like terms. Once again, X is 1X. 1X minus 2/5 X. Well, 1 is equal to 5/5. So 5/5 minus 2/5 is 3/5. And if you're doing this in your calculator, it might say something like 0.6, which is fine. As long as you, divide by the decimal at the end, that's perfectly fine. So I get 3/5 X minus 30 equals 450. So I'm going to bring this over here. I get 3/5 X equals 480. Right, we're going to multiply both sides by our reciprocal here, which is 5/3. And that should give me X is 800. Let's go through the problem. Patty started with $800. She spent 2/5 of it, which is $320. Right? That's going to leave her with $480. Now what happens? She spends 30 more. So she spends 30 more. Now what does that leave us with? 450. Okay, so that's our check. Really, guys, we should be writing the equation like this. And again, really once we get good at this, I don't want to say that after you've seen one of these, you're a master. And I've said that a lot recently, right? Especially this year, things are a little bit different. But as you practice this, right? So me personally, when I'm looking at this problem, I'm saying, all right, what happened? Patty spent 2/5 of her savings. Right off the bat, I know she's got 3/5 of it left. I don't need to do X minus 2/5, right? If you think about what she has versus what she spent, she's got 3/5 of it left over. And then 3/5 of X, not 3/5, right? And then she spends 30. So really, you should end up with this equation here. But for a lot of us, again, if you need to do the first one, right, that's fine. Eventually we want to get to the point where maybe we can do the second one. But if the first one is what's working for you, and I've said this a lot also, you do what works for you. This should be a really easy one, I think. So X is the time in weeks. So we think about this kind of like we would with the graph for science, right? X is always our independent variable if time is a factor, and X always represents the time. So in this case, X is the time in weeks. So what do I know? My plant is 17 centimeters tall, and it's growing 0.5 centimeter every X weeks, okay? So the height at any given time is the initial height of 17 plus 0.5 inch per week, where X is the time in weeks, and that's going to give us 29. So this should actually be pretty easy, I hope. So I get 1/2 X equals 12. Now, if we're working in decimals, guys, you can just use your calculator for this. In other words, maybe if I was in class, I would convert the 5/10, the 0.5, into the fraction half, and then multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2. Most of us at this point are leaning on the calculator a bit, and that's fine. So we should end up with 24. So what's happening? Well, if it grows 0.5 centimeter per week, after 24 weeks, 24 times half is 12. So it started at 17. Right? We added 12 centimeters, right? That's going to get me to 29. That's my check. So we're not going to check the equation, right? We made that equation. There's no guarantee that equation I made in blue is remotely correct. But if it turns out that when we get our answer from the equation and we go through the problem that it works, then that's our proof that we actually did, in fact, do this correct. All right, let's do maybe one more, since one of the homework questions will be similar to this one, and then I think maybe we'll be good to go. A used car salesman makes $10 per hour plus 5% commission on all sales. All right, so what's commission? Commission is a percent of sales that people in certain sectors, like retail, like people that sell houses, people that sell cars, they make commission as an incentive to sell. Okay, and in class we have a long discussion about what commission is and why. Again, to keep this kind of short, that's all you need to know. Commission is a percentage of sales that salespeople make as an incentive for them to sell more things. So this person worked 40 hours and earned $630. So a lot of different stuff here. Nothing that's too difficult, but there's obviously a lot of more numbers than we've seen before. How much were his sales? All right, let X represent the amount of sales, and that's the amount of sales, obviously, in dollars. All right, so what do we know, right? We make $10 per hour, and we worked 40 hours. So we know that this person made 40 times 10, right? That's their base salary. That's before if they don't sell anything, they make their $10 an hour. Plus 5%. Now let's be careful, guys. 5% is 5/100ths, right? A percent is a part out of 100. So 5% is 5 parts out of 100, which as a decimal would be the 5 in the hundredths place. So 5/100ths of X, where X are his sales or her sales. Okay? Let's be careful. Again, if we see something that's 2% or 3%, that's 2/100ths, let's say, 0.02, not 0.2. That would be 20%. Big difference. So this is the income model of this person, right? They make their $10 an hour for their 40 hours, plus they get 5% of all of their X sales. So let's see what this looks like. And again, for the decimal, if you really want to be fancy and turn it into the fraction 1/20th and then multiply by the reciprocal, more power to you. But for a lot of us, again, working with the calculator is perfectly okay. So now I'm going to divide both sides by 5/100ths. All right, and we should get X is equal to 4,600, right? So if we were answering this in a sentence, that's where we'd use our $, and we'd say the salesperson's amount of sales for the week was 4,600. And when we check it, when we take 5% of 4,600, we end up with $230 in commission, plus their $400 in their regular salary gives us our $630. All right, guys, there's your now try. So that's the question that you are going to pause the video to work on. You're going to do it the exact same way that we did it in class, right? You're going to write your let statement, and you're going to work your way through the problem. All right, and then you can unpause, and we can say, let x represent the amount she started with. Right, so I'm going to do it in the multi-step way, but hopefully we streamlined it a little. So Jamie had X dollars. She spent 2/3 of her X dollars, right? Not 2/3. That would be 2/3 of a dollar, which doesn't really exist because it's fractional. So we have X dollars. She spent 2/3 of our X dollars. Then she earns $15, right? So she makes $15. Now she has $75. All right, let's see what this looks like. Well, x being 1x minus 2/3 x is 1/3 x. And guys, that's a time, if you're going to use the calculator for something like that, make sure you convert it back into a fraction. I don't want to see a coefficient of 0.33333333, okay? If you put in 1 minus 2/3 and your calculator gives you a decimal, press the button that converts the decimal into a fraction. So now we have a two-step equation. We add negative 15 on both sides. That's going to give me 1/3 x is equal to 60. So I'm going to rewrite 1/3 x is equal to 60. I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is 3. And it looks like it should give me x is equal to 180. So our answer in a complete sentence would be Jamie started with $800, right? We're talking about turning the question around. Jamie started with, $180. So let's check it, right? She starts with $180. She spends 2/3 of it, right? Well, 1/3 of 180 is 60. So 2/3 of that is two groups of 60, meaning she spent 120, leaving her with 60. But what did she do? She earned $15. Great. I made $15. Now what do I have? 75. Okay, that's our proof we did this correctly. And just to reiterate, guys, if you did this, wonderful. That's the way I would do it, right? Because I'm going to look at this problem and I'm going to say, okay, Jamie had some money, whatever. I don't know how much money she had. She spent 2/3 of it. So at the beginning of this problem, right, she's only left with 1/3 of her money. And that's exactly what we see here. So for those of us that are making mistakes with the subtraction, you want to think about doing it that way. You want to think about, what did she actually start with? 1/3 of her savings. And then she added 15, and then that was 75. All right, guys, homework time here. So we've got number 1, number 2, number 3. Your directions for your homework, okay, are, for each of these, you're not going to copy the question. You are going to write a let statement. Let x, let a, let b, let c, y, whatever variable you want. I don't care. Represent blank, okay? And then you're going to write the equation, solve it, and answer in a sentence. All right, so for the first one, let x represent the number of miles driven. And then you can write an equation, maybe something like 80 plus 0.5x is equal to 115. You're then going to solve your equation and then answer in a sentence. The number of miles you drove is, or you drove 7,512 miles. As always, guys, questions, because for some of us, maybe this is a little bit tricky. If we have any questions, we post the comments on Google Classroom, and you guys know I've been pretty good at getting back to you guys in a timely manner.